Hello, welcome back to my channel, or welcome for the first time if you've never seen my videos before. My name is Bryn. I am transgender and non-binary, and I make videos about those topics. Today I wanted to talk about something that was actually requested of me, which is why I identify with being non-binary instead of identifying with being a gender non-conforming woman. And I thought it'd be interesting to go into really what is the difference and why does it matter to me and all this kind of stuff. And also hopefully maybe some tips and tricks about how if you're trying to figure out who you are, maybe these things can help you. So that's what today's video is going to be about. Before I get started with it, I do want to say, I think 3 videos ago, maybe 4 videos ago, one of the more recent videos that I've done was about my life as a trans woman, because I did come out as trans when I was 18, and I still resonate with the term trans, even though I'm not a binary trans person. But in that video, I talked about my life when I was out as a trans woman, and I did not feel good about it. And, you know, I'll leave, if you're interested, I'll leave that video up here and in the comments down, or the description box down below. But to summarize, basically, I felt like there was so much pressure from the outside world and even just from myself, like internalized stuff, that I had to appear as a stereotypical straight woman. And that felt very, very off and very, very wrong. And so I talk a lot about my dysphoria in that video, being centered around being a woman. But a lot of it was more about the the discomfort or the disconnect. A lot of it came more from the pressure from the outside world onto me instead of who I was at my core. And so this video is going to be more about me talking about who I am at my core and how I figured that out, instead of just how I figured out how I like people to treat me or how I like to be interacted with or things like that. So if you're interested, stick around. Let's get to it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is, what is my identity? Obviously, non-binary is what I label myself as. It's in every title of my videos ever. But non-binary is a very vague term. So I kind of want to be a little bit more specific because there's so many different experiences and so many different ways that people will describe their own non-binary identity that I think it's important for me to say how I feel about mine, and that, you know, obviously plays a part in who I am. So with me being non-binary, I do not resonate at all with being a man or a woman. I feel like my gender is completely separate from both of the binary genders. And to simplify, I'm a third gender, I guess. I've never really used that term before, but that's kind of a good way to simplify it. I've talked about this before, where people talk about the gender spectrum being male to female, and sometimes people think non-binary people are in here or something. But for me, it's male and female, there's a line, and then I'm non-binary, I'm up here. I'm not on that spectrum, I'm over here. So with that being said, that kind of plays a part in how I feel about womanhood, you know, in reference to me having womanhood or being a woman or whatever, you know. I don't fit there. Like I said, third gender type of thing. The first thing that I want to talk about, though, about how did I figure this out? Why do I identify with being non-binary and not with being a woman is, you know, obviously I don't believe that people are meant to fit in boxes, you know, metaphorical boxes in our head that you know, one group of people is like this and one is like this and one is like this. I think it's kind of just it's like watercolor, it just flows all around. But for myself, when I look at myself, actually, let's backtrack for a second. If I have a friend who, let's say, I've known, you know, from the time I was a kid, and he is, as far as I know, a cis man, and he comes up to me and he says, actually, I'm a trans woman. And I'm like, okay, she's a trans woman. I can do a switch in my brain to see her as a woman now. And it doesn't matter really about the way she's dressing and whether or not she passes or whether or not she wears makeup or has long hair, you know, any of that. I can see, for the most part, sometimes it takes a little bit for me to get used to, but for the most part, I can flip a switch in my head and see people for whatever identity they want me to see them as. And I can do the same for myself. And something that I never really thought about until I got asked this question or got requested to make this video, is, and I used to do this all the time. I don't do it as much anymore, because I do know who I am and I do feel really at home in my body and stuff. But I used to, and I still can, look at pictures of myself, you know, like selfies I take or whatever. And I can look at that and be like, okay, that's Bryn as a girl. And then I can look at it and say, that's Bryn as a non-binary person. And then I can look at it and say, that's Bryn as a man. And all of those things feel different to me. Even though it's the exact same picture, I get a much different feeling about myself when I switch that little switch in my brain. And when I can see myself as non-binary, and androgynous as well. Those two terms are not interchangeable, but both of those things are very important to my identity. But when I can see myself as non-binary, or when I do see myself as non-binary, is just when I feel the most at peace. It's like a sigh of relief almost. I don't know exactly how to explain it. But that's something to try if any of you are trying to figure this kind of stuff out. And like, I don't know, like, obviously it depends. Some people get really uncomfortable looking at pictures of themselves. You know, sometimes maybe people don't have the same like switch thing that I'm talking about or whatever. Like, so it might not be like a foolproof plan, but it might be something to try out if you're open to trying out things. I don't know, it really helped me, and it still helps, and it's also, it gives me a sense of like gender euphoria, like looking at pictures and being like, I'm non-binary, like, I don't know what it is, but it feels good. Now, I do want to say, and I've said this in other videos, I feel comfortable being perceived as a gender non-conforming woman. And there's a few reasons for that. A, my expectation of the world's view of me is not to have the world see me as non-binary. I would like that. That would be awesome. I love when I'm like outdoor dashing or something and someone's like, oh my God, are you non-binary? Or like, what, you know, like I'm like, ah, like this is great. Like people can recognize me for this. But I know that that's not necessarily a typical thing for the general American citizen to like think of somebody as, you know, unless you're like, you understand what being non-binary is and whatever, like you're probably seeing people as either male or female. And so when that happens, when I only have the options of being male or female, being a gender non-conforming female feels the best because it just does. I don't when it comes to gender roles, I guess, I feel like I fit the gender non-conforming woman, which sounds a bit strange because gender non-conforming really can mean anything that's just not stereotypical woman. But for me, it like I feel like I fit the roles of an androgynous woman, and I don't even know exactly how to explain that, but I feel like I fit the role of an androgynous woman. And so being labeled as that by people who don't know anything about me or anything about gender really isn't like a slap in the face, because it's like, that's the best you can do, really. Like, like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, the random stranger in the middle of Walmart, they're not just gonna magically look at me and be like, oh my God, now I know about this new term non-binary because I saw this person. Like, you know, so being labeled as a gender non-conforming woman is definitely manageable and definitely okay. Being labeled as a gender non-conforming woman isn't the worst thing in the world, and it really doesn't make me feel bad because it's typically done by people who don't understand me, and I don't expect them to understand me, especially from just walking into me in the middle of Walmart. Like, how are they gonna know who I am? How are they gonna know anything about me other than what they see? And, you know, when it comes to like gender, whether it's your own gender or other people's gender, it's like, it's a lot, mostly about perception, I guess. I don't know that I don't like hold me to that, because that might be a problematic statement. I'm not sure. But what I mean by that is like my perception of my gender is my own, and other people running into me can have a completely different perception of my gender than I do. And so the fact that they're able to at least label it as something that's sort of close, I guess, is like, okay, that's a small win, I guess. Like, it's kind of how it feels. The next thing I want to talk about is my dysphoria and being assigned male at birth. So I have dysphoria over my downstairs, and I have dysphoria, or I don't have a whole lot of dysphoria anymore. I do have a little bit about my brow bone or whatever, but for the most part, I don't have a lot of dysphoria anymore because I'm on HRT. But also, before I keep going, I do want to say I have a date for bottom surgery, so I'm super excited for that. I'm not gonna like say the date, but I am gonna hopefully do like videos and stuff like while I'm waiting and like with recovery and stuff like that. But it's in a few months. I'll just put it that way. It's in a few months. But I'm super excited. But anyways, when it comes to dysphoria, I also get dysphoria over my chest. And it's not super common. It goes in phases. Like sometimes I'll feel dysphoric over my chest for like a month or two, and then I'll feel fine about it or whatever. But it's not super strong. It used to get pretty bad. It's kind of like, you know, but it comes and goes in waves, I guess. But I do hold the theory, which I've talked about in other videos as well, that had I been assigned female at birth, I would most likely get top surgery. And on top of that, I would probably be dysphoric of my hips and like a lot of things that are like generally considered to be feminine traits on people's bodies. So before I go forward anymore, I do want to say again, being non-binary and being androgynous are not the same thing, but being androgynous is so tied into my identity that like for me, they almost are the same thing. Like not when I look at other people, like I'm totally fine with non-binary people who are not androgynous or don't want to be androgynous or like whatever. But for myself, like they're very much intertwined. Knowing, or at least knowing as much as I can, that if I had been assigned female at birth, that I would get dysphoria over parts of my body that aren't considered to be androgynous, like, I don't know, that just feels, it feels deeper than like an aesthetic, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So like, like, yeah, there definitely can be like gender non-conforming women and gender non-conforming men and all that kind of stuff. But for me, like at my core, like when I'm looking at myself in the mirror, I want to see an androgynous body. That's what I want to see. And it's not just like an aesthetic, like, oh, this is cool, this, you know, whatever. Like, it's like very much down to my core. And I'm very uncomfortable with a lot of the things that are stereotypically linked to, or that are linked to stereotypical women's bodies. And I don't have a lot of them because I was assigned male at birth, but I think had I been assigned female at birth, I would have had them and I would have felt bad about it and I wouldn't have felt like myself. And you know, I know there's not necessarily a direct correlation, or there doesn't have to be, between your gender and your body, because there's people that are comfortable with bodies that don't stereotypically fit the mold of what it means to be a man or a woman or a non-binary person or whatever. But for me, I don't know, I see myself as a completely different gender, and like viewing myself as a gender non-conforming woman isn't enough. Maybe. No, I think that's what I'm trying to say. Like, yeah, being a gender non-conforming woman is fine and like manageable and dealable, and, or it's easy, it's okay to like, I'm able to deal with it and it doesn't bring a lot of like icky feelings in, but like, it's still not enough. Like being non-binary is like where it really hits the mark, it hits home, and it's like, yes, like this is what I've been looking for, like. And so it really does all kind of just dissolve down to a feeling that I have, which I don't really like know how to explain what that feeling feels like, but it feels like me. It's like, it feels like home. I don't know. It feels not good as in, I mean, it does feel euphoric sometimes, but it feels good as in like authentic and like I'm playing my own character of myself instead of playing the character of other people, you know, that I've done for a large portion of my life, is how life felt like to me anyways. And yeah, basically being non-binary feels like home. Oh, I do want to actually go into just a little bit more. I've talked in other videos, specifically my video, like the the feminine part of my gender neutral identity or something. And I'll have that up here and in the description box down below. But I talk a lot about in there where I feel a lot more comfortable being feminine or being like woman-like or whatever around women, specifically other women who are gender non-conforming and or not straight. And apparently that's a very common experience, whether you're trans or not. It seems like it's pretty common that like almost like femininity is something you can share with other women as like a personal experience, but it's not necessarily something to be, you know, exploited or, you know, be expressed to the world, kind of. I don't know if I'm really wording that right, but what I want to say is I do feel more comfortable with femininity around women who are gender non-conforming. I do feel comfortable in those situations. I think I would feel the most comfortable in a group of non-binary androgynous people. Like that would be like, yes, but like there's not a whole lot of like groups for just non-binary people who are androgynous. That's like a small portion of, you know, society. So like if they had a women's group, even like those women's groups that say that non-binary people are welcome, but they probably just mean non-binary people who are assigned female at birth, and they probably don't really actually understand anything about what it means to be non-binary, and they just slap the label on there to try to be inclusive. Even if they had an event like that, like I've never been to those events, and I don't think I would feel comfortable with that because I feel like that revolves around womanhood, and I don't feel comfortable with that because I'm not a woman, even if my experience in the world as of this point is much more similar to the experiences that women face rather than men. Identity-wise, I don't really relate to that, and I would not want to walk in there and have everyone just assume that I'm a woman, especially when the whole thing is like revolved around being a woman. Like that's the focal point. Like that would just feel really off. But I do feel comfortable around gender non-conforming women. But for the most part, that's because they understand the gender non-conformity. And I just feel like there's like this level of understanding that like, you know, regardless of what your body is or whatever, your identity can be different. And like, and I'm not just talking about your gender identity, but even your identity with being gender non-conforming or being androgynous or even being masculine or whatever. It like deviates from the stereotypical idea of a woman being feminine. And so they can at least understand that. So if that didn't make sense or that was a little bit confusing, basically I'm saying I can relate to women, specifically gender non-conforming women, on like an experience level, like the way that we've interacted with the world and the kinds of like hurdles we've had or whatever, and like the understanding on a general idea, you know, how the other person feels possibly. But I don't relate an identity, just experience. So it's kind of like, I think that's how to word it. I think that's the best way. And I do feel comfortable, when I say I feel comfortable around women who like women or whatever, or gender non-conforming women, it's typically more in settings where I know all the people and they know me, and like I think just walking into a women's group or walking up to a group of gender non-conforming women and being like, hey, what's up? Like, I think I would feel terrible. I don't think that would go over well. I don't think I would feel at home. I would feel really isolated and all that kind of stuff. But like when it comes to the people in my life, I mean, most of the women in my life are not straight, and, you know, some of them are gender non-conforming. Like, I just gravitate towards those people and I feel comfortable around those people. So yeah. I think that's all I really have to say for this whole video. If this helped, let me know. I'm hoping it did something. I feel like I was able to articulate things better than I normally am, but I still kind of feel like I'm almost just dancing around instead of like, it's hard for me to have like concrete evidence, I guess, of like, this is why I'm non-binary, because there is no evidence, because there's no right or wrong way to be a certain identity. It's just more about what resonates. It's more about what resonates with you and what feels like home. And so at my core, I feel non-binary, and that's that. But hopefully these things, and even like the looking at pictures of yourself and stuff, hopefully maybe that's able to help. If you have any other questions or anything, you are welcome to comment down below or message me on social media. I do usually recommend Instagram. I will eventually get back to you, but I don't reply right away typically, because I have to be in the right headspace and all that kind of stuff. But anyways, this is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. See ya.